I'm being asked to admit them. Are you admitting them?
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Morning.
Hello.
Hello. So I don't know if you want to wait a few more minutes, Rebecca, to get more people in.
Morning, everybody. Nice way to start the
Hello.
week. Hi. Have you all got your cute mini bottles? They're so cute. Yeah, great. Very small. They could go in like a doll's house, couldn't they? Good morning, good morning. A few more joining us. You're 2 minutes late, disgraceful. Welcome.
Hello, Katie. So for everyone, I'm just going to mute everyone's mic so there's no like echo happening during the webinar. If you want to ask a question, feel free to press the raise emoji, and then you can either ask the question verbally or you can put it down in the Q&A or in the chat, and then I can just communicate to Rebecca and then she will happily answer the questions. I don't know if you want to start already, Rebecca, or if you want to wait a few more minutes.
Fine, we'll go. We've only got an hour together, so and we've got a bit to get through, and we've got 6 wines to taste in our cute wee bottles. So why don't we just hit the road? Thank you for joining us this morning. I can't think of a better way to spend a Monday morning than tasting wine. Obviously, with me, it makes it even better. First of all, we're gonna. It's reverberating back at me. If you could, I can hear myself. It's horrible. Okay, so basically, why are the gems of the Loire? So the Loire is a huge region, and today what we've done is we've picked 6 wines that belong to what we're calling PDOs and CDGs, which we'll know all about at the end of this seminar, but which may flummox you right now. We're really it's all about, we're going to dive down into the pockets, the real gems, the jewels. We're looking where we're going to go below the surface. We're not going to have a huge first of all, we're going to look at the huge context of the Loire, but then we're using that to then drill down into like the finer points of why the Loire is really focused on terroir, and why it doesn't just want to be a value proposition, and why it offers great terroir wines beyond it's not just Burgundy that can have great sites. Okay, first of all, we're gonna start with the Loire Valley's manifesto as such, and it'll play for approximately a minute, and then we'll bring up the presentation. Let's go.
The Loire is our wellspring. The multiple identities of our wines reflect its character, free and wild. For 2,000 years, the rich geological characteristics of the land have been absorbed into our know-how. The Loire proves that the volcanic and oceanic terroirs produce different flavors, and that combining them brings out a natural beauty. Contact with it stimulates infinite inspiration. Through the Loire, we have become a bridge between vineyards and landscapes designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, a bridge between popular and more exclusive estates, between the varying shades of reds, rosés and whites, between sparkling and sweet wines, between simple and more complex wines. By drawing the riverbanks closer to each other, we produce an immensely rich array of wines. It's important to us to promote this subtle balance with sincerity, because openness to others, the curious and the initiated, is our true nature. The Loire is much more than just our source of inspiration. It is the bedrock of all our creations. By learning every day to adapt and to preserve its environment, we achieve the unique harmony of Loire wines, the wines of a lifetime.
was quite good, wasn't it? Saw all these places that I knew about. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to share my presentation to you. If it works, I mean, it would be wonderful if it does. Okay, 2 ticks. Oh, wonderful. Voila. Has that worked? Can you all see Gems of the Loire? Are you all nodding? I can't see you anymore, so I'll just have to hope for the best.
Yes.
Well, lovely, lovely. Okay, so you've seen some lovely vistas there of the Loire. And instead today you're just going to look at my office. So we've watched that, and first of all, without further ado, hopefully we all know that the Loire is in the northwest of France, and like say Dijon, for example, some of the best terroirs, we're on the 47th parallel. So we're up in, like, when we will go to WSET classes, you know, we always learn in like WSET 1 that we learn like the 30 to the 50 in latitude. So 47, we are quite marginal. This is kind of really where you are at the margins of ripening Chenin, ripening Cabernet Franc, and that's what kind of makes it so exciting. Now, the Loire is the 3rd largest wine growing region in France, actually, after Bordeaux and the Rhone. And it has 51 different appellations. So we're not going to go over them all today. I actually couldn't probably name them all, even if at a push. But there are 51,000 hectares of vines in the Loire, and that's bigger than the whole of the New Zealand and whole of the Austrian wine industry. So, you know, this is a big and a long region. Now we have sort of given ourselves a little bit of context of where we are. Let you know that the Loire is actually the longest river in France. And if you were to straighten the Loire out from end to end, that's 992 kilometers. That's actually the distance from London to Berlin. And the actual centre point is in Puy-Fumé, which is in the Centre Loire. And there is there's a bridge there, and there is a plaque that says you're at the centre point of the Loire. Now, Loire is not just one river. We say, oh, you know, this wine comes from the Loire Valley, but in many cases, the wines actually don't come from the banks of the Loire, and we'll see that today. For example, when we go to the Muscadets, which are wines 3 and 4 today, those wines are coming from the Sèvre and the Marne rivers, whereas if you're in Chinon, for example, your wines are on your vineyards, are on the Vienne River. And as we'll see today, if you go into the Touraine, we're going to go to Chenonceaux. That's going to be our second wine. Those wines, the vineyards there, are actually on the Cher River. So we may say, yes, it's just one river, but actually it's many, many rivers that make up this diverse wine region. And now the Loire claims to be the most diverse wine region. Now, I'm not sure if other wine regions have something to say about that, but as we saw in the video, you can see everything from sparkling wines through to still to red and through to sweet and everything in between. So yes, it makes a whole gamut of wine regions. And if you can think of another wine region that does all of that, that's a classic AOP, let me know. Moving on, as you can see, it's single life in the Loire Valley. Blends sort of with the sparkling wines, yes, but really, I think that one of the things why I like the Loire is it shouldn't be so difficult to understand. And while we want to drive down into terroir, you know, this is we're going to be in the land of Chenin, or if you go further to the east, you're in the land of Sauvignon Blanc. If you're near the Atlantic, you've got Melon. It's not Melon de Bourgogne anymore. You can't call it that because the Burgundians got miffed. So it's just Melon or Melon B now. Now, the wonderful thing is that you don't have to, you know, like remember Chateauneuf de Pape, and they keep increasing the number of varieties that are in there. I think it's like 18 or 19 at the last count. When I did my WSET, it was only 13. It was a lot easier. So you're really seeing pure varietal expressions in a place. And what I love also is I'm not a massive fan of oak, and I like to see the purity of a wine. And when you come to the Loire Valley, even with the Cabernet Francs, we'll see some oak today in our Chenins as well, but often you get to see a pure varietal expression and where that get a real sense of place. Next up, one of the things about the Loire is you might have noticed that It has been a hotbed of the natural wine scenes and etc., etc. But one of the key aims that it has had is that by within 5 years, it wants to have 100% of its land under some sort of environmental certification, whether that's organic, BD, whether that's HVE, or whether it's Terra Vitis, or something else entirely. But they're actually already at 85% of that. So 85% of the Loire is already made it under environmental certification. Whatever you think about those certifications is your opinion, but all under the that's a real, I think that's a real thing that should be celebrated. And as we go through the wines today, that you'll see that there is a real increase in the number of younger generations, those people who are starting to take over their parents' farms, and they're actually most of them are now moving towards organic if they can, and if the weather permits. It's obviously not the easiest place to grow grapes, especially close to the Atlantic when you've got that sort of maritime cooler climate. It's not the easiest place to to avoid fungal diseases and such like. So for that level of green credentials to be so high is I think is commendable. Now I'm already into talking about the complementary geographical designations, and we're going to start out in the Touraine. And when we start out in the Touraine, we're going to sort of deep dive here. We're going to go into the area, because you can see on this map here, it's quite small, so apologies for that, but it's quite small. But Touraine means it's around Tours, and it's a large region, generally to the east of Tours. Now, when we think it's we're about 3 hours drive here from the coast. So the influence of the Atlantic is diminishing here. So more of a continental climate, moving into continental climate. Now it's a big old region, this 12,500 hectares. You can see on the map, you can see to the west of Tours, you can see some of the famous red appellations such as Chenin Blanc and Saint Nicolas de Bourgogne. So they're your red Cabernet Franc appellations specifically. And then you have just to the east of Tours, that's where we start heading into sort of the real white stronghold. Now you go, if you wanted to go to any of the Touraine, you can actually fly into Tours using Ryanair. And you can go from Stansted. I actually looked at how much the flights were, and then you can go for €19 on Thursday, should you wish. So it's really easy to get to. And as you land in the airport, if you look out the window, you can actually see the vineyard. That's the boundary of the runway. Are you still there? The boundary of the runway and the appellation of Vouvray is actually, they meet. And you can actually, if you drive around, if you drive from Tours to the city of Amboise, which is where we're going to look at next with our first wine. If you drive there, it's about 30 minutes drive along the river. The appellation of Vouvray goes along the 7 villages all along the river. So you'd have to drive through Vouvray to Amboise. Now, obviously, Vouvray is always Chenin, which can be everything from dry to sweet. Today, we're going to... Oh, is there a question? No. So we're going to go, so we're going to focus on Touraine. Now, Touraine has, it's been long been a source of, the appellation has been a long source of very good value wines. Of the 12,500 hectares on that map in green and blue, around just over 6,000 of them belong to the Touraine appellation. Now that's a big appellation, and you can get everything from, as you see on the pie chart, everything from white through to red and sparkling. White is the predominant thing, and Sauvignon Blanc has become Touraine's calling card. Touraine Sauvignon, everyone's looking for it on their list these days. And it now accounts for about just over 40% of the whole surface area of Touraine OOC. But it hasn't always been the case. I think that's more of a, I think it's been market led. Lots of people have been pulling out Gamay and Co, aka Malbec, because people want Sauvignon Blanc. But also, Touraine has said, you know what, we don't just want to be a source of, you know, well-priced Sauvignon Blanc. We want to be seen to have great terroirs. So they've been looking at how they can do that. So what they've done is they've actually gone, right, we're going to make some small, what they call some village denominations under the Touraine banner, where you adjoin your name, the village name or the place name, to the name Touraine. And the idea is to make much stricter rules to elevate the quality of the wines. So what they're looking to do in these Touraine Amboise, Touraine Azilarido, Touraine Oisly, where's Oisly, and Touraine Melland and Chenonceaux, they've said, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that you have to plant on slopes, for example, on better, well-drained sites, better exposure to the sun, all that sort of thing. We're going to make sure the maximum yields for these sort of complementary designations are going to be more stringent than just in the Touraine AOP. They're also going to say, right, we're going to have longer on lees, 6 months on lees, for example, to give greater texture. So what they're looking for is they're looking for greater concentration in the wines, and they're looking for greater texture. Therefore, higher quality wines, therefore elevating the Touraine name. Well, let's move on to the next. Has anyone got any questions as yet? No, all quiet? All right, okay. So the first, we're going to look at 2 of the 5 denominations under the Touraine banner at the moment. And what they've done is they've appended the name Amboise to Touraine. Now, Amboise is a beautiful castle, has a beautiful castle, beautiful town, beautiful alleyways, and this is very much a royal castle. This is where kings of France have been born, lived. It's also where Leonardo da Vinci is buried. A little bit of fun facts there for you. So as you can see, of the 12,500 hectares that are in the whole of the Touraine, this is just 110 hectares. Now, my maths is not great, but that's not very many percentages, is it? So basically, when it comes to it, as you can see here, they're going to have much more stringent sort of much more stringent rules. A smaller area. They're really, and if you're seeing a Touraine Amboise, which we are today, it's got to be, the whites have got to be Chenin. So you know what you're getting when you see Touraine Amboise, you're going to go, right, I'm going to get a higher quality Chenin Blanc. If it's a red, it's likely to be Caux, okay, which is Malbec. So the first wine that we are going to have today, yay, we're already at the wines. The first one we're going to have is Touraine Amboise. Now, if you go to see Coralie and Damien de Lecheneau, you can go into their vineyard and you can stay at their place and you can actually see the Amboise chateau from their vineyard. So they're that close. Now, they have their domain name is La Grange Tiphaine, domain La Grange Tiphaine, and like the Tiphaine is a grange, sorry, is a barn in French. This is not like, so we're here where they may see a beautiful chateau, but it is quite a humble wine estate. And I think that what Coralie and Damien de Lecheneau represent within Touraine Amboise is they represent sort of the new generation that came through in the noughties, along with, say, you know, Vincent Carême in Vouvray, who's about 20 minutes drive away from their vineyard, to you know, Sébastien Brunet, other people in Vouvray like that. There was in the early 2000s, there was this sort of movement where a young generation came back to take over the family domain. Now Damien is like the 5th generation. He came back 2002, and all these guys had studied, they'd gone abroad to get extra winemaking experience, and then they came back, which is something that their forefathers had never done before. And what Damien has done, as well as like the likes of Carême, etc., they've gone, you know what, we're gonna, this is sort of the generation that have moved towards organics. So when Damien joined, brought back all his international experience, as did his peers at the time. When 5th generation, they went and said, right, we're going to go to organics, and they have since been practicing biodynamics since about 2014. He's also been spearheading a complete ban on herbicides in the Appellations of Mont Louis, where he is the president. Now, let's have a taste of this. What this represents is organics. It represents like very hands-off winemaking, which I think that is, for me, is very typical of the region. Now, if you're in this area in Amboise, it's going to be, you're mainly on, it's sort of an extension of the soils and the climate of Vouvray. So you're on like the clay limestones, but you're also on some which is like the base rock, but then you're on these flints, distinctive flinty clays that are called perouche. Shall we have a taste together? No, you can see that beautiful sort of golden sheen. Even though it's not being, excuse me, even though it's not being in oak, you know, they've done lots of, this is cement tanks, giving purity. I love that lees texture and aromatics. Now this is what we're, amazing acidity. Beautiful. I love acidity. That's one of the reasons why I love the Loire Valley. It just gives such a natural flood of mouth-watering acidity. Also, can you see it's quite a fruity style as well? And this is sort of what you might see as more of like an entry-level style. I think it can be called an entry-level, but yeah, it's their more fruity, approachable style with like that fine apple and pear. It has a lovely generosity, I think, and that tenderness. I think that tenderness in the palate and the generosity on the palate that comes from the limestone, I often think. And then when you get like some clay, I often think if you ever seen Ghost, do you know the episode, the part of Ghost where Patrick Swayze is behind Demi Moore and then like on the potter's wheel, and that's what you get. I think I always get like off clay vineyards, is that sort of like potter's wheel clay wet slip. I like that texture. And I think it has lovely line, it has lovely length. I'd be happy to smash that this evening if I had more than 40 mils, but I don't. So there you are. So that's just an example of Touraine Amboise. If you were looking to further explore another great producer in that, remember it's tiny, it's like what, 110 hectares. You could also try Bonigal Baudet, who I also think are one of the best producers in the Touraine Amboise area. So that's Touraine Amboise. So it's near the city of Amboise, beautiful place to visit. You can fly there. You can fly 30 minutes from there on Thursday for €19. And then there's the much bigger complementary designation called Touraine Chenonceaux. So while some of the Touraine PDOs have got are then appending their names to villages, Chenonceaux is actually was a royal castle in the 16th century. It was, but then Henry II gave it away to his mistress. So that's why it survived the French Revolution. It's now owned by a load of chocolatiers. Do you know the Menier chocolate? Yeah, they've owned it since 1913. And if any of you are history nerds like me, it's a wonderful place to visit. Only €18 to visit. You can park for free. It spans the river. It spans the river, and it's actually during World War II. It was that river, the Cher, was the boundary between the free zone and the occupied zone, and people used to go through the Chateau de Chenonceaux to traverse the river to get from the free zone to the occupied, from the occupied zone to the free zone. So I think that's a really lovely, interesting thing to know. But Touraine Chenonceaux, so this is the largest of all the Touraine, the 5 Touraine designated DGCs, shall we say. And here we go. So we're along the Cher. So as I said before, it's not all just about the Loire Valley. It's actually about other rivers as well, tributaries. Now, when it comes to Touraine Chenonceaux, we're leaving Chenin behind, and we are focusing in on Sauvignon Blanc. So we're about 2.5 hours drive from Sancerre here. If you want to buy a hectare in Sancerre, you know, if you've got €250,000 to spare, go ahead. But lots of people especially the younger generation who want to set up, aren't, you know, the 6th generation of their family. They might want to set up shop and, you know, start in viticulture. They can't afford that, but you know, you can pick up a hectare in the Touraine area for like €15,000 ish. So that's a lot more reasonable. Now, the idea is for Touraine Chenonceaux is to promote Touraine, append it to this beautiful chateau, look for a bit more prestige, and look for what they're looking for here is the idea is that you plant on the hillsides and you have some south-facing slopes, improving your ripeness, great drainage, for example. But obviously, one of the things that you have to do is you have to have lower yields than, say, in Touraine AOC. Also, there is a tasting panel. So what you can expect from a Touraine Chenonceaux is a higher quality Sauvignon Blanc, something with more concentration, once again, more texture. They have to have that lees aging. So it's about premiumizing Touraine, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to taste this one. It's from Domaine Villemain. Here we are. Here's one I made earlier. Now, 100% Sauvignon. Now, it's got a classic nose, hasn't it? Gorgeous. Like varietal nose, lovely nectarine. I'm getting some passion fruit. And like some blackcurrant bud. Yum. So that's what you're expecting. It feels very pure. It feels very clean, but it has good, I feel like it has got good focus. Now, one of the things that I've been to Touraine Chenonceaux a few times, and when I visit the people there are some producers. There are some producers who are like, oh, you know, it should be hand harvesting if you want to be in a DGC, and there is a little bit of controversy there. However, when it comes to Sauvignon Blanc, I feel, in my humble opinion, I feel that hand harvesting is not as important for Sauvignon Blanc as it might be for, say, a Riesling or a Chenin or you know, it's another variety like a Chardonnay, for example. That's because, you know, what you want from a Sauvignon is those thiols, and what I mean by thiols is that aromatics. So it's like black currants, those gooseberries, those passion fruit and boxwood flavors that are so typically Sauvignon. And when you do hand harvesting, you actually increase those thiols, so you're actually emphasizing those aromatics, and I think that's no bad thing. And then that actually, when you hand harvest, that actually does. You see some skin on the notes here. It says that there's some. There's some skin contact there, and that also, if you have some skin contact, that can increase your aromatics again. And it also increases the texture. You get some phenolics, that tannic phenolics. And so let's have a look at that. We can maybe see those nice phenolics giving drive, because you know what, 2023 is not that high in acidity. It rained quite a lot in 2023 as a vintage, but it was a warm vintage, and so levels of acid aren't that high. So I think that that little bit of skin contact has added a bit of drive. You can feel free to disagree with me if you think I'm talking rubbish, but yeah, I think it adds some drive to that. So let's have a taste. Yeah, I think that it really gives some push and pull that phenolics, that skin contact. But you do have to be careful with that. There are some producers in the Touraine who are totally against it, and some who are for it, because it also, if you put some skin contact, it can also lower the acidity because it's got the potassiums. And if you know, once again, do you want to lower the acidity in your Sauvignon? That's sort of stylistic choices, isn't it? You know, Sauvignon should be fresh, it should be pure. But I think from tasting that, you can taste that. You know, you've just gone up a step here. You've said, oh, you know what, there's quite a lot of concentration in here. This has spent 9 months on lees, and I think that you can taste that on the mid palate. There's some creaminess, some richness. The mid palate has been given an extra bit of weight. Thoughts? Any questions?
Yeah, you've got 2 questions in the chat. So one of them was like, if we could note the retail prices as we go by.
Oh,
not sure if we have them, but we're more than happy to send them later on, so you can have them with your details later. And then the other question was like, how close is Touraine and Bois from Vouvray? How close is Touraine and Bois to Vouvray?
Really close. Like, if it will go back, we'll go back. So literally they're bordering, they're neighbours. So you leave Vouvray behind and you move into Touraine Amboise. So it's, if you see that, and if you see like if you see the soils, then they're not dissimilar. It's kind of an extension of what's called the falaise, that clay limestone, the cliff, and then you get the flinty, and then you got on the flats, you get more flinty clays that warm up more easily. You'll have to visit. Any more? Yeah, I think that Touraine Chenonceaux was about 20 quid. It's not like, obviously Touraine is, about 10, 15, but yeah, when you're stepping up, yeah, you are paying a little more for that. So I'm afraid that was like a very, here's Touraine. They have some complementary geographical designations. Worth looking at them if you want to seek out a more premium Sauvignon Blanc. That's not, it's sort of not quite, it's like much, it's still cheaper than a Sancerre, but you're getting that sort of quality, that higher quality. Particularly great for, I'd say, independents, rather, yeah. Whereas you see like a Touraine Sauvignon on most of the supermarket shelves as like an own brand these days. All right. So now we're going to go on a little drive. We're going to head west. We're going to head out to the coast, and we're going to go and head into Muscadet, Atlantic influenced Muscadet. I love Muscadet. I have a little bit of a soft spot for it, I have to say. So we're still in very cool. We're still in the Loire, and and obviously this is very much more maritime influence, and yet they still suffer from terrible frosts, and that's one of the reasons why like Muscadet fell off lots of wine lists in the early 1990s. I don't know if any of you remember the 1980s. I was still at primary school, but I have read about it. But in the 1980s, when I was still like crimping my hair and wearing leg warmers and dancing to Salt and Pepper, Muscadet was very much like sort of that house wine on the list. It was like the Pinot Grigio or the Picpoul of wine lists, and everyone knew it, everyone ordered it by name. But then in 1991 there was an incredibly bad frost, despite it being so close to the Atlantic, and it devastated the region. The region had no wine to sell, and literally it was one of those wines that you sell the next spring. You make it, you bottle it, you send it to market. At this time, it couldn't really be in a worse time, to be honest, because this is like the early 90s is when Australia, Chile, New Zealand are appearing in the market with real fruity, fresh, bold wines that are varietally labelled. When there was room on the shelf in lists for a new wine, because there was no Muscadet to drink. So at that time, they went and filled those like spots on the lists. And when Muscadet actually had some product to come back and sell to people, there was no room for them. So it went through like the area of Muscadet has shrunk by more than a third since then. People have given up, and also it's so close to Nantes. If you are in Nantes, another great city to visit, great place to live, a university town with loads of trams. You can be out in the vineyards in 15 minutes on the tram, and Nantes is expanding as a city, and so there's more and more urban development, and some of those people have just they've given up the vineyards to sell for real estate. They've had a really hard time in the last sort of 20-30 years, but there are some people who are saying, you know what, we need to do something about this, and we need to make people see that Muscadet can be a premium region, which it truly can be. It's got the sites, it's got the winemaking expertise. It just needs the world to wake up and realize that. And I've written about this quite extensively because I feel that there is an opportunity here for people to catch on to. Really easy to get to. Once again, you fly there, do it quickly, and it's just quite easy. It's quite easy to understand. It's Muscadet. It's made from the melon grape, one grape variety. It makes crisp, dry whites. There's nothing in between. So what they said, a group of producers said, is we want to elevate this place we really want to focus in on our villages. And so the first they call what they started off calling them cru communaux, but they actually legally they can't be called cru. But basically, they have these basically villages now that they've settled down on. Once again, it's got to be, you know, it's got to be all the stuff about, but it's got to be all the stuff about smaller yields, etc., etc. But if you want to be in one of these cru, it's all about lees aging. So if you, for the first three cru under those village designations were Gorge, Clisson, and Le Palais, and they became cru or what complementary designations in 2011. Another 4 were added, which are in that order in 2019. And then since then, another 3. So there are now 10 village designations. And what does it mean to be a village designation? Well, if you're in Muscadet, Sèvres et Man, you have to have a yield of like 55 hectolitres a hectare, whereas crus must not exceed 45 hectolitres a hectare. So obviously, lower yields should equate to a bit more concentration. But basically, you know, since those yields are even a little bit ambitious, this year they've had a really good yield. But, you know, frosts have still keep coming through. Yeah, to reach 45 hectolitres a hectare is a good year for them. So the key stylistics between a Muscadet, Sèvres et Man and a cru is basically how long you're meant to leave it on lees. So when you might have learned, you know, Muscadet, Sèvres et Man, and you see Sur Lie on the label, that means it can be taken off its lees and bottled from March 1st, following the harvest. So, you know, 6-7 months on the lees. However, when it comes to cru, they have to stay on for much, much longer. So, you know, the Palais, which we're going to taste next, is going to be, it says minimum 18 months for lees. For Clisson and Gorge, which are the first, were 2 of the first cru, they have to be 24 months minimum on lees. And Chateau Thébault, actually, that is unnecessary. That's 3 years on lees. Wow. And wonderful thing about this is when you go to visit, it's not like you go and see loads of stainless steel tanks and loads of barrels. You walk through the cellar, and actually the cement tanks, the original cement tanks, are underneath your feet. They, you know, glass-lined cement tanks went out of fashion in like the 90s, 80s, 90s, noughties, but now they're really back in fashion, but they never changed it. It's like me, I'm never in fashion, but sometimes it comes around because I never change. But anyway, paradoxically, I think one of the funny things is that you put in some of these wines on lees for, you know, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you can't put Sur Lie on the label. You know, go figure. So some of the one of the great things about Muscadet, in my opinion, is that this is quite weird, cool rock. They're igneous and metamorphic. These are volcanic rocks that have been pressure. There's been pressure. So you get, when metamorphic is when you get a metamorphic and igneous. It's like volcanic rocks that have been shaped by, and then some of them have been shaped by heat and pressure. There's no limestone here, it's granite and it's schist, and it's that, which make really like focused wines with plenty of direction and line. Now when we go to Le Palais, as you can see, a huge appellation, a huge CDG, all 5 hectares. Now when you think about it, 5 hectares, most wineries have got like parcels bigger than that, so I don't think you're going to be seeing it on a big global scale. So when you think about it, like I was doing some comparisons the other day, and I was like, 5 hectares for a CDG, I was thinking that's small. So I looked up how big Chateau Gruyère is in Condrieu, and that's 3.8 hectares, and everyone goes on about how small that is. So Le Palais, it is a rarity, so I think we should enjoy its rarity value. Now when it comes to this wine, it's from the 2020 vintage. Now 2020 was a warm vintage, and when you get this, and these are on schist and gneiss, so you're expecting like a warmer style, a richness, not only from the vintage, but you're also expecting a richness from that time on lees. Okay, this has actually spent, even though the minimum time is 18 months aging, this has actually spent 24 months on lees in those concrete tanks. And the person who makes it, the Domaine Menard Gabaret, though these are very much symbolic or of what's been happening in the vineyards at the moment. Now, so they've gone back to traditional winemaking, so they're using those concrete vats dug by hands by their great grandfather in 1914. But they're now working with native yeast, What I loved on the technical sheet of this, it said it's one of the highest altitude domains in the Nantes area at 58 meters. This is yeah, it's not Ribera del Duero here, guys. It's not Mendoza. 58 meters. That's considered high in Muscadet. So altitude does definitely not play a part in Muscadet. Ooh. So such richness on the palate that I love it. You can use that silky, generous, elegant style, but it has brilliant acidity again. Even though 2020 was a warm vintage in the Loire, for the Loire Valley, we're still in a cool climate here. Let's not forget. And that retention of acidity, and it's only 12% alcohol. I just think to be able to get that texture with 12% alcohol is amazing. Obviously, melon, the grape variety, is non-aromatic. That's originally why when the Dutch merchants came around in the 1700s and they were looking for around the Atlantic coast and were looking for a base wine to distill, they thought melon was a great grape for that because it doesn't have a lot of aromatic complexity. So basically they've built the aromatics, that sort of nice melon flavors, and there's quite texture. There's quite some dairy notes, aren't there? That nice leesy, textural, yogurt-y sort of sheep's cheese character going on there. Yeah, and and I think that you've got a lovely tension, and that's one of the things that comes from the sort of these metamorphic and igneous rocks, is that you get that real lovely smack of tension on the finish. Any thoughts on that? Does anyone want to ask any questions? No. Yes, no. Do pipe up if you have. I don't mind at all. The next one we're going to taste from our 40 millimeters cute dolls shaped bottles is we're gonna go to oh sorry, I just didn't even go into there for you, sorry. Anyway, you have it on in your little lovely box. So we'll go on to Clisson next. Now Clisson, you can actually get the tram from not city of Nantes into Clisson. And for me, if you're going to go and visit, if you're going to go to Muscadet and you're going to stay anywhere, stay in the village of Clisson. It is a beautiful town with a beautiful bridge over the river and winding streets. Beautiful, and you can stay there, and that could be your base for your Muscadet discovery trip. So same grape variety. Silly melon. When it's Muscadet, it's always melon. I think Clisson is one of the easiest designations to actually identify blind, because it's sort of at one end of the scale. For me, Clisson is the richest, the most powerful, the most full-bodied style. It's because it's the thing is that Clisson is on granite, and generally you have a really shallow layer of sandy topsoil, and that heats up really quickly. And because the soils heat up really quickly compared to other types of soil, you get really warm, it retains the heat. That means you get extra ripening compared to other denominations within Muscadet. Therefore, you get this richness. Often you'll get, while this is only a 12% alcohol wine, often with Clisson you'll hit 13%, which for Muscadet is high. Let's have a look at it. I think that I was speaking to some of the domains in Muscadet, and I was like, which markets like which type of denominations, and they found that the American market really loves Clisson because it has that richness, that power. Whereas, like, if you get the absolute other end of the spectrum, there's a Muscadet called Gorge, like gorges is how you spell it in English, Gorge, and that's got really cold soil. And that can be really tense and really quite a powerful, full-on style. It's almost like steely. So if your Clisson is like a Merceau, then your Gorge is more like a Poulini or a Chassagne, which is like really firm and down the middle. But anyway, let's have a look at this Clisson from Domaine de la Bretonnière. Now it says on your book that it's the 2017 vintage. It's actually the 2022 vintage. So please do correct that. Now, the minimum aging here for Clisson may only be, I think it's only 24 months, but this one, sorry, so but you can go much further if you wish to. You can go as many months as you wish. The age of the vines, if that's interesting to you, is 30 hectares. 30 years, sorry, and the yield's 45 hectolitres a hectare. So, which is, oh, sorry, I put environmental, I haven't put the environmental certifications in there. Apologies. It's HVE, I believe. Let's have a look. So during that 24 months of aging in those underground concrete tanks, there's no racking, it just stays on lees. It doesn't take enough as lees until it's bottled, basically. Can you see that texture? And then there's also like a real lovely chew on the finish. These wines are all about texture, and once they're bottled, they continue to age well, though they are ready for drinking upon release. There's no need to rush. And I think that Jancis Robinson said a few years ago when this had just started, she compared this wine styles to aged Chablis. But whereas you might be able to pay like €7 for a Muscadet that's had like 2 or 3 years on lees, you're looking at an entry-level Chablis at like 12, 13 euros ex cellar. So basically we need to communicate this and tell everybody how great Muscadet is on particularly these new communal crew, and say, for value for money, these can provide a lot of wine and a lot of care. Who's going to Clisson next week with Ryanair? Or are we going to Amboise? There we go. Right, next up, we're off to the Anjou Saumur region. So we've gone from Touraine, and then we've jumped over Anjou Saumur to Muscadet, and then we're going to come back. So if you leave, say, not behind, it's about an hour's drive to Angers, and then it's about another hour's drive onwards to Saumur, if that helps you with distances and such like. So we're going to look at the Anjou Saumur region, and what I've done is I've just mentioned some of the key AOP here in the list, and as you can see from this, most of it is white and most of it is Chenin. The reason why we're focusing on this is Chenin is Anjou Saumur region's white calling card. When it comes to the reds, you looking maybe like Saumur Champagny, you're looking at Cabernet Franc. But today we're going to be honing in on expressions of Chenin in these two regions. As you can see, it's a massive region. There are 20,000 hectares in Anjou, and if you can see on here, if you're making a dry white wine, whether it's if you're Bonnezeau, which is a famous sweet wine region, or if you're making an excellent dry white wine from the Carte de Chaume, Grand Cru area, that sort of part of the world, all you can do is label your wine as an Anjou Blanc, in much the same way that if you are a Sauterne producer and you start making more dry wine, because the market's not drinking that much sweet wine, is it? But you can only call it a Bordeaux Blanc, which is kind of generic. So you have to really know your producers. If you don't know your producers, there's a lot of diversity and potential differences in quality, and it can be difficult to know what you're looking for. So what they've tried to say is, how do you differentiate Anjou from this whole large 20,000 hectare area? How do you choose a Chenin? And they've said that basically we're going to do it by soils. Now we're going to quickly look at soils. This is the two big soil types that we're seeing in this part of the Loire. So just if you go west of Angers, this is what's called the Massif Armoricain. And the Massif Armoricain is basically a volcanic metamorphic like schists and gabbro and granite that we saw in Muscadet. So that's your metamorphic igneous rocks, okay, volcanic rocks. Then just east, there's a fault line that's called the Léon fault line. If you've heard the Côte du Léon, the Léon is a tributary of the Loire where they make sweet wines. If you go just east of Anjou, there's this fault line divides the Massif Armoricain, which runs up to Normandy and Brittany. It's on the schistous soils, and then you go into sort of the Bassin Parisien, which is sedimentary and used to be underneath the sea. Limestone is if we're broad brushstrokes, limestone. And as you can see here in this, there's a castle there, and that's the city, that's the castle in Angers. Now, as you can see, there's the turret, like the turrets, you can see the columns, they're made of this white stone, and that's the limestone of the Bassin Parisien. But if you can see, there are also black parts of there are black stripes, and that's coming from the Massif Armoricain. So I think that the city of Angers really shows that it's on the fault line there, that it's a divide between this Massif Armoricain and the Bassin Parisien. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at two different wines. We're going to look at one that's on the schists and one that's on the limestone. And I want to show, as well as diving into the complementary designations, but really going to show you that, what a Chenin looks like when you really look at the soil type. Here we go. So these is what I was talking about in Anjou, just south of Anjou. Excuse me. So you can see that there are 9. They've come up with 9 AOCs, just like they have in Muscadet. They're like attached to villages and such like. And just like they have done in Touraine, where they've added like Touraine or Touraine Chenonceaux. The Côte de Glanfoy, for example, is named after an abbey. And then you see Bernizelas. That's actually the old Celtic name for Bonnezeau. Have you heard of Bonnezeau? It's a famous appellation making sweet Chenin. But if you want to make dry Chenin in Bonnezeau, you just have to call it, until now, you just had to call it Anjou Blanc. And that doesn't really tell the whole story. So so they're wanting to, be more focused on where and what on these wines come from, drawing on like the ancient heritage of the wine growers' knowledge of these plots. As you can see, most of them are actually, some of them are to the south, most of them to the south, but there are a couple that are on the Bassin Parisien side, and some are on the Massif Armoricain. So the Côte de Glanfoy and La Touffière in the north, above to the northeast of Angers, they are both on the limestone, so they're on the other side of the fault. Now, the whole point of this is, they're saying, right, if you're going to name your wine like this, like Anjou Mille Rock or Anjou Saint Martin or Anjou Bernizelas, you're going to have to hand harvest. You're going to have lower yields, and you're not allowed to chaptalize. And most of all, you're not allowed to, and you must age your wines for longer than just like the next spring. The spring, they call them wines of spring. They're like, no, you must leave your wines on lees for longer. This is once again in a bid to raise the bar. None of these DGCs are bigger than 150 hectares. So they are bijou, not quite as bijou as the 5 hectares of Le Palais Muscadet, but they're still pretty bijou. And excuse me. Yeah. So it's not yet. They're not on the label. So they're hoping for approval from the INAO, like the Appellation organization in Paris. They're hoping for approval in 2026, and that they will be able to put these on the labels from next vintage. Now, the one that we're going to try today is from Montchenin. So it's the one that's the furthest southeast, Montchenin. And Montchenin is the area. So as you can see, Montchenin, we're on the Léon, and you can see it's the southeast facing slopes overlooking the river, which is always a good place to be if you're in such a far north appellation, if you're on the 47th parallel. So the wine we're going to taste today is Domaine du Petit Clocher. The vintage is 2022, not 2023, as it says in your books, it's right on that slide. Okay, so this is Domaine du Petit Clocher. It's in one of these supposed, now it can only be an Anjou Blanc, but it would like to be an Anjou Montchenin. Now, this is on schist. It's on what we call degraded weathered schist. And it's the topsoil is like basically non-existent, so it's going straight into the schistous soils really well, which means it drains really well, has great, and its roots it is permeable, so the roots can really go far down. Now 2022 was a really ripe vintage, warm, very dry. in vintages like that, when you've got one like the which is quite unusual for the Loire, you go, how do we keep the acidity here, especially on southeast facing slopes? You pick early. So they picked on the 10th of September, which is, you know, early for the Loire Valley. And although once again they picked early this year because it's been another warm summer, and no malo. That's how you try and preserve your acidity. But as you can see here, the alcohol of 14.5%, it's a really ripe style. What I want you to look at is, I want you to look at whether you can sort of feel like that schistous nature. I often see it as like the tonic of the gin and tonic. It's like a slight bitterness on the finish. It's a good bitterness. I love the good bitterness, like a quinine type character. You're going to see in this one what I think maybe slightly marking, slightly camouflaging some of the terroir characters is that it has been put in new barrels. So that might be something that you're going to see first. Let's have a taste. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely some new barrel there, isn't it? So those vanilla macarons, and that really hits you at the front of the palate. But then once that's hit you at the front of the palate, that lovely nectarine, like pithy grapefruit really comes along as a brightness about it, as a real energy to it. And can you feel what I was? I mean, you might have thought I was talking absolute rubbish when I was talking about gin and tonic, but that real grip. There's an almost like a ferocity about Chenin off schist, which I absolutely love. It's quite characteristic. It's like Concorde's just passed through, you know, if Concorde was silken commission. But yeah, it feels like it's like, well, Airbus is based in Nantes, so we're not far away. But yeah, it's a real sense of bitterness. And a real drive and a chew, really grippy. I love it. There is a sense of that little slight warmth on the finish from the alcohol, but that doesn't disturb me at all because it has that freshness and that power. So if
Rebecca, someone's got the hand raised, so I don't know if they want to.
Sorry, please go ahead. I can't see it. That's sorry.
Do that person wants to write the question in the chat or say it? Can't hear you. Unsure.
Okay. Well, feel free to speak up or send it, or if you've got a question, I'm always available later. It's fine. Okay, so that was schist, Chenin on schist from one of these proposed CDGs. And then we're going to go off to Saumur. So we've left behind the schists and the volcanics. Now we're heading over into the former sediment. So we're going into sedimentary now. We're heading away into the limestones, which used to be under the sea. Now we're going to go into Saumur with its like gorgeous royal heritage. Obviously, as you can see here, the Chateau of Saumur is white or limestone here. And so if you go to Saumur, it's one of the beautiful cities, and they've got amazing wine caves, a bit like that have been dug out from the rock, this limestone white rock, which has basically built the town. So the town is basically made of this white stone. That has left all these wine cellars behind, all the rocks being taken, and that's where they age lots of these sparkling wines. You know, if you go to Bouvet-la-Debay or Langlois Chateau or Gratien and Meyer, which are in the town, they can go and explore their caves, much like you would do in, say, Reims or Epernay in Champagne. So the idea of having complementary designations in Saumur is exactly the same as in Anjou and Muscadet. It's actually to say, you know what, we need to be more. We have some really, really cracking sites we have some great sites within Saumur, but it basically, even if you're from one of the greater sites, you just still call it Saumur Blanc, and that's not terribly helpful to the consumer or the trade, for example. Its most famous wine village is called Brezay, which there's a Chateau de Brezay. And that they do actually put the name Brezay on some of the top whites from like Clos Rougeard, Domaine Guiberteau, and Arnaud Lambert. But since 2018, a few members of the Appellations, the Saumur Blanc appellation, have been working on a dossier, and they're been slicing up the terroir as such, which actually looks like, which might make your eyes glaze over, but they've been slicing up the territory. So not only that, the aim, once again, which hasn't come about yet, the aim is to be able to legally put smaller designations on, like Brezé, La Côte, Courchon. And basically really focus in on dry Chenin. Now, when we think about Saumur Champagny, that's always Cabernet Franc. And for like half of the wine production, when you think of a Saumur, like a third of the production is red, half of it is Chenin based for the Cremant de Loire. So it's comparatively little dry white in Saumur, but then they want to sort of promote that. There's a growing desire for dry whites, and they're hoping to once again elevate the status of dry Chenins from the Saumur region. Similar to what we've seen before, lower yields. So from 60 hectolitres down to 53 hectolitres if you want to be in one of these CDGs. You have to hand harvest the crop. You're not allowed to chaptalize. And you have to mature the wine in the cellar for a year before release, which is actually quite a long time compared to, say, Touraine Chenonceaux, which is like only 6 months. It's also really big. People are using it to say, do you know what? It might be a bit, some of this might be a bit confusing for all of us, because we're like, holy moly, do we even know what a Saumur style is? But it's also good to encourage the producers themselves to, really focus in on their best sites and go, do you know what? Don't machine harvest it, don't chaptalize it. And see what happens if you can mature it in the year and allow it to spend some time relaxing. So the one that we're going to have today is from Saumur Puy Notre Dame, which is the far one in the far southwest. So if you look at Saumur and you go southwest, it's the one that's further southwest. And Saumur Puy Notre Dame is where the next wine comes from. It's a small hillside site. It's about 20 minutes drive from Saumur. It's only had its own appellation since 2008, but that's for reds only. And the idea is that we want to focus on Chenin, dry Chenin, quality dry Chenin, and we're going to look at this one, which is from Frédéric Mabillon. Now, this wine from Frédéric Mabillon, Frédéric Mabillon is actually based in Saint Nicolas de Bourgogne, which is on the other side of the Loire Valley. So it's on the north bank of the Loire Valley. But you can't, in Saint Nicolas de Bourgogne, you cannot make whites. And they really wanted to make a Chenin. They can only make Cabernet Franc in Nicolas de Bourgogne. So they said, right, we need to find a site that can make Chenin. And they found a site here with like vines that are over 40 years old in Saumur Puy Notre Dame. And so these, once again, Saumur Puy Notre Dame has hills. It's basically, you have a lot of farmland around, and then it suddenly comes into sort of an unusual hillside. And then instead of crops, which are all around, suddenly you find vines on the slopes. And these slopes are clay limestone, which is ideal for Chenin. So Mabillon, a pretty famous producer when it comes to this part of the world. They've been organic and biodynamic for far longer than most of the producers. Unfortunately, Frédéric Mabillon, his name is on the domain, but he died suddenly in 2020 in a light aircraft flight, and his wife and his 2 sons have taken over the management of this. Now, as well as being BD, this wine is also is slightly oxidative. Now, yesterday I was trying these wines. I've had 2 cases of this. One has been very oxidative. Oh, this one, the ones I've got in my mouth, in my glass today, is actually quite reductive. So I don't know what kind of style you've got. So I was thinking it's going to be oxidative, and then I picked it up and I was like, oh. What I like about, there's a certain smokiness to this, which I think is probably coming from both the indigenous yeast. And if you're spending 24 months on lees are quite reductive, and that could be one of the reasons why you're seeing that sort of like that flinty note in it. Could be the soil too, but look, when you get things on clear limestone, the clay gives that richness, and the limestone adds like a tenderness to it. I wonder, it'd be quite interesting to know what kind of styles you've got in your bottle, because as I say, yesterday I had a really oxidative one that has sort of like almost going into a cidery now, and this one's very tight. So I think there may be some bottle variation, but that often happens when you've got a biodynamic producer using low levels of sulfur. yeah, and yeah, bottle variation can be a thing. But yeah, look, these are not yet in place. They do not exist yet. They exist, but they are not in law. These Saumur and Anjou PDOs. But I think it's important for us to say, hey, this is happening. It's important to say that that there's lots of producers who are really focusing on quality in the Loire. We want to tell you about them as well, and we would like you to explore it further. Now, I appreciate that my hour is certainly up now. So what I'm going to say to you is, if you have your phones on you, we would love to know what you thought of the webinar. You can use this QR code. Please, I mean, basically, only if you enjoyed it, just use the QR code. If you didn't enjoy it, just basically don't tell anybody. No, not really. Please do let us know what you thought. I know that Juliana at Hopscotch is going to she'll send you the link again to let you know what we thought of the webinar, if it was helpful. And if you do want to know more about the Loire, there is a series of these seminars taking place over the coming month. And Juliana, and they haven't yet taken place, but they will be taking place all around the world, and they will be recorded like this one, so that you can take part in that if you want to learn more about the Loire in the coming weeks or months. You can watch webinars at your leisure. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this, but on the 4th of November, I'm also holding a thing called Love Loire, which is a big tasting of 40 domains, 200 wines in London. If you're interested about that, you can find me on Instagram, DM me, let me know if you would like to come. We can send you the details. But yeah, if you want to taste more Loire wines, learn more about the PDOs of Muscadet, Touraine, you want to drink more Chenin, who doesn't? We would love you to come. All I have to say is thank you to Loire for allowing me to blether on about wines for another hour. And thank you for your patience as well. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's given you a bit of inspiration to go and discover a few more Loire Valley wines. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You've got some questions. There was one question in the chat. Regarding the Anjou wine, is there any lees aging in the 5th wine?
Ooh.
In the Petit Clochette?
Yes, there should be. Yeah. So yes, it's been in barrel for 16 months, so they've been on fine lees for that entire time. Yeah. So definitely, it's had 16 months, over a year. I don't know whether then it spends 8 months resting. I think that will have been off lees before market. That'll have just been in a tank without lees.
And then I think there was another one regarding the Muscadet.
Oh, yeah.
Are the lees stirred when they're in the concrete tanks?
Good question. That is a good question. What nerds we have here. Marvellous. Right. Generally no in Muscadet. Generally no. However, on occasions there is the only reason I think there's there's only been a couple of producers that have done that in recent past, and the reason they've done that is because they've had to hurry their wine to market because basically the harvest was short. The previous harvest was short. So if they had a short harvest because of frost, say in 2017, they met the next vintage, they stirred the lees because they wanted to bottle it earlier. They wanted to get it more ready more quickly for the market. So it's more of a market demand than it was a style thing. And I think that if you get a particularly cold year, you do see not necessarily in Muscadet, but in the Loire, like in 2021, for example, it was a really cool vintage in the Loire, frost affected cool vintage. And I did see producers who had never stirred lees before stirring lees, because it was quite a lean year and they wanted to build body. But generally in Muscadet, there's no lee stirring. Is that a good enough answer? I think so.
I think so. I've seen a lot of comments about the PowerPoint. I will send email later after this. We'll include the PowerPoint, the link to the survey if you haven't completed it already, and some other bits and pieces that might be useful for you in the future as well. I don't know if anyone else has any more questions for Rebecca. Please feel free to ask them, put them in the chat,
Not
etc.
find me on Insta. I'll reply to you at some point in the indeterminate future.
Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure having you, especially with the some inconvenience with the sample kits. I do apologise for those who have had those issues. I will follow up with you all later on the day, and thank you so much, and hopefully see you in the next one.
Thank you, Julianne. Thanks for having us. Bye.